What up? It's Lou. Doing another Lou Noah review. This time, a spoiler, more in-depth review of Rise of Skywalker, the last Star Wars movie, which I just saw a second time. I did a short review when I first saw it on Thursday, like a midnight screening, and so I wanted to do a longer review where I could, after seeing it again, and where I could go a little more in depth into it. So I watched a few reviews of it. I saw basically, I was surprised at how much it was disliked, and I noticed that there was a discrepancy in the audience and the critics, the audience being higher, which is usually a good sign for movies. And I mentioned it in my first review that I was surprised people hated it so much. I liked it. So since then, I watched a couple more reviews because I was able to watch reviews that had spoilers now. So I watched Jeremy John's review and Chris Stuckman. Jeremy John's a little like, in general, sticky. Like he's like trying to create this persona character, whatever, for the reviews. Whereas Stuckman is just pretty straight up. So I enjoy his reviews more. He's not like being all animated. Not as many cuts because it's clearly not as like, and I don't cut my stuff at all. That's partly because I'm being lazy, but also because I feel like I like when it's just more of like a genuine kind of flow of consciousness. Thoughts on it. Should have had notes for this probably. So, that said, Stuckman didn't like it. Neither of them liked it. Nobody seems to like this movie. But Stuckman made some interesting points, which I gotta say I have to agree with some of them. So, I saw it with two of my friends last night. Neither of them liked it at all. None of them are fans of the prequel, or sequel rather, trilogy. And, I definitely liked it more than them, and I still enjoyed it a second time, but I see a lot of the complaints. So, jumping into that. One of the big things that, like, okay, let me start with one of the things that my friend said, which was that he liked the thing that he liked about the original trilogy the most was the mythology, not the action. It was cool and everything. So you got to look at these first of all. Like, what are you looking for from a Star Wars movie? So I agree with him that the mythology of the original trilogy is what makes it cool. But also for me, a big part of it is just the basic idea, the basic rules of this world that Lucas created. The Jedi, the Force, and lightsabers. Like, just those two things alone are cool. And, it's like a scaled down version of, like, you look at Lord of the Rings, right? And part of the strength of Lord of the Rings is that it. Excuse me. Part of the strength of Lord of the Rings is that it just created this world, this mythology. And so this was obviously not as detailed of a work as Tolkien did, but part of what's cool about Star Wars is just the world. This world that we exist in, dark side, light side, the Force, the powers. And one of the things that was always frustrating to me was then I saw stuff like the Clone Wars animated series done by the people that did Samurai Jack, and the Jedi's powers or some of the games or some of the extended universe, and the way the Jedi's use the powers is so much cooler than they get to in the movies. And that makes sense because, at least it makes sense to the original trilogy because it was a new idea. One would have hoped that they would have developed upon that. A problem with the prequel trilogy doing that is the same thing they run into whenever they make prequels later on, that if they push all these new things, well, why didn't those exist in the previous movies if they existed before them? So it was really a chance in the movies in the sequel trilogy for you to see some new examples of this stuff. So I'm running off on a tangent. The point is that for me, I love the mythology, yes, but also just the world. I'm also looking for just cool lightsaber battles and like like the Force and stuff like that. And like one of the coolest things about the Force Awakens is when he stops the blaster bolt midair, right? Like, I love stuff like that. So already right there, there's part of the reason of the split between people that really didn't like this movie and me who enjoyed it more. Um, the story was a mess, but this without a doubt delivered the best action since Duel of the Fates, the Darth Maul lightsaber battle, which to me was the best part of that movie. Um, and so right there alone, I'm already happier than a lot of people, than my friends were, and a lot of other people who that's not really what they're looking for from a Star Wars movie. They're looking for more of the mythology of the story, and they're not the action. They're not that's not the big selling point for them. So this movie, without a doubt, and my friends agreed, had some of the best action of any of the movies. Um, is it on the level of like the best action movies today? I don't know. I mean, in terms of, like, visually, it's pretty cool. There's one lightsaber fight in particular, like the way they were force stopping the lightsabers, for example, or the way she was able to force heal. Like, I just liked seeing new uses of the force. Like, that was just cool to me. I thought it just, like, the force is a cool idea. It never gets used enough in the movies, and this time it got used more. Okay, so then I'm gonna be jumping around, as I'm thinking of stuff. So, I'm trying to address the criticisms first, and then move on more to the things I like. But I'm kind of shifting back and forth. So to jump back to another criticism that I can see the point of, Stuckman was saying, look, Luke was the chosen one in the original trilogy. I'm sorry, Anakin was the chosen one, and he was supposed to bring balance to the Force, and there was a consistency to the arc in the first trilogy, obviously, and then even in the prequel trilogy, which gets ragged on a lot. There was a consistent arc in terms of the story, because you were seeing the other side of how he was bringing balance. In that he started out like his whole, like, the arc of his family, essentially, where you know where it's going if you know that he's Vader, but he becomes bad, he brings down things, and then his son ends up sort of bringing, reversing that, and it's like this sort of long cycle that does sort of bring balance, essentially, to the we're led to believe by the end, at the end of the original trilogy. Then of course this shows that it comes back again anyway. But so his point was like, this whole long arc is essentially just kind of defeated because the Emperor's death is made meaningless because he pops back, and Rey is now the one that's sort of bringing balance, quote unquote, or achieving what they want, and she's related to Palpatine, not so it's like you're sort of this great idea of like the chosen one and bringing balance to the Force, and then his offspring and all this stuff. Like, it's this consistent arc through the other trilogies that's just kind of like thrown away. Yeah, I see that, and I can agree with that, but I still enjoyed. I still think these are better movies than the prequel movies, even though they might have had the prequels had a more consistent thread, and they connected to each other better. Acting, writing, all the other stuff is just not as good, and directing and everything. So I see that point, but it doesn't bother me in the same way. It's this trilogy is definitely not on the level of the original trilogy, but it's better than the prequel trilogy to me. And then so and just specifically in terms of like the consistency of the plot and everything, that's a problem for sure, but it doesn't ruin this movie for me, because it was already, that's the thing, is it was already ruined. Like, that's what I don't quite understand. Like, Stuckman was saying like this ruins the whole other thing. Like, they already ruined Vader in the prequel trilogy. Like, they the whole thing, like his whole plot line was the worst. And Stuckman was saying, Revenge of the Sith, the only one you can watch again. I gotta go back and watch this again, but like his the descent into evil, into the dark side, was just so poorly handled. I hated it. It just all of a sudden he's killing kids because he thinks he's gonna be able to save his wife, but then he just ends up killing his wife anyway. It just didn't even make sense. It was like it should have been more of a lust for power. It should have been, he should have really been trying to save his wife, and then it somehow spiraled out. But it was like it just was so poorly handled. So it's like, yeah, there was a consistency in terms of the where it was going, but it was so poorly handled. So I'll take an inconsistent but better handled storyline over that any day. So I don't see how you can say that this ruined anything. Like, it was already ruined. Vader got ruined as a like this Vader got ruined as a villain because he became like this whiny. It was just so stupid, like the way that the famous scream no, and then it just was bad. So, so yeah, this didn't have the same consistency, but it's still better than that last trilogy, and I enjoyed some of the arcs, and yeah, it's so. I mean, this leads me to the main problem with this series is that, as far as I can tell, and Stuckman agrees, there wasn't really a overarching plan. They basically gave it to JJ, and then JJ was like, did his thing, and then left it for somebody else to do the next one. And I mean, I don't know if he was planning on coming back, if he didn't think that the person next after him was going to go as far away as they did, whatever it was. And then you get The Last Jedi, which was just went against a lot of things that were set up in The Force Awakens. And so essentially what ended up happening was this movie was two movies. It tried to be two movies in one. This was essentially JJ's sequel to The Force Awakens and the third one in the trilogy, and the one that corrected stuff from the last movie that he didn't like, and I agreed with pretty much all that, his corrections. And then he had to finish a 9-part, story essentially. So he had to do all this in a single movie, keep the runtime down, and it was an impossible task, and he did, I think, a pretty good job. So I mean, basically that part of the problem, part of people's problem with this movie, I see, but I think I mean, it's just, I don't see how else it could have been done. Snoke was set up as this big villain in part one in Force Awakens, gets killed off like nothing in Last Jedi. So what? Now they need a new villain. So what's he do? Because he was, they know the consistent thing is that Kylo Ren, they want to bring him back to the light side. In the end, he's not going to be like the main villain. They've made him too sympathetic. They've gone into too much depth in his story, in his characterization. He's not just going to be, a villain, the main villain. So who's going to be the main villain? Snoke was being set up for it, and Rian Johnson, from the director from Last Jedi, was like, forget about that. So bring back the Emperor. Does it make sense? Not really. But I mean, they had to do something, and that's not the worst idea, in my opinion. And I don't mind that it sort of nullifies what was happening in the original trilogy, because that's already been nullified by the prequel trilogy in a lot of ways. And then, Rey's heritage. How is she so powerful? Everyone's complaining. No training. How is she so powerful? As an aside, by the way, people complain when you accuse people of sexism, or when they talk about like the not liking Rey or not liking. It's like, oh, these are just. It's not that at all. These are just they don't like diversity casting just for its sake, and they also it's just not as good. How did it, just on its own merits, her being able to use the Force and all this stuff without training is BS. Meanwhile, baby Yoda in The Mandalorian, apologize, it's all over the internet, so it's not really a spoiler, uses his Force powers, no one cares. So I gotta say, there's gotta be a little merit to the sexism part of the Rey discussion. Anyway, they made her, so her heritage, that bothered me in the last movie. It's like, oh, she's super powerful, that's dope. How are they gonna explain this? Oh, they're not gonna explain it. So JJ went back and was like, nope, I'm gonna explain it. I'm gonna say she's Palpatine's granddaughter. Okay, so it doesn't make the most sense, but like I like the fact that they gave her a heritage which feeds into why she's so powerful. Okay, what else? So, what was the other thing he had to go back and correct? The, the the bad guy, her heritage. Oh, the other moment which I really liked was a lot of people hated the fact that I was waiting for this dope training sequence with Rey. I was thinking Luke's gonna be training her in the Last Jedi. And it just didn't really happen. There was like a short training thing, and when she first gives him, that moment at the end of Force Awakens where she's handing him the lightsaber, you're like, like, it's gonna go down, and then he just throws it away, and everyone was like, "Yo, are you serious?" Like, so many people complained about that, and I didn't like, and myself included, I didn't like it. So in this one, he literally like cancels that scene out. He's like, okay, I'm gonna have I forget how it got knocked out or thrown out, and they have the Force ghost of Luke catch the lightsaber and give it back to her. So it's almost like I felt like it was almost like he was catching it from when he threw it away. But in the other movie, I thought it was a really cool, well done way of J.J. Abrams saying no, everything that all this stuff that happened in not everything, but all this stuff that happened in the Last Jedi. No, that's not the way. That wasn't true to the characters. That wasn't true to Luke. I'm fixing it. So it's like I just feel like he really did maybe not the best job he could have done, but a really good job at all these things. And one of the main things was fixing the problems that the Last Jedi created by sort of going against previously established characters, storyline, and and all that, like including the Snoke and Luke and all this stuff. So, okay, that's pretty much everything. Like, so then the last thing I'll say is just again, like visually. It just, there's some really cool stuff. There's like their light speed skipping, which is really cool. This part where they're like jumping in and out of light speed, visually amazing, really cool idea. The force techniques, the force healing, the force blocks, the when she gives him the lightsaber, the force transporting. Like, I just thought all that stuff was cool. The action was super cool. The visuals were amazing. Some of the flying sequences. I still think some of the stuff was cheesy. I think the end. I think she should have died, honestly, or she something about. I mean, the way that it ended it was corny, because she's dead, and she looked convincingly dead, and then my friend says that he thinks Kylo brought her back with his energy, and that's why Kylo just died out. Maybe I hadn't thought of that, and even the second time I hadn't thought of it until he said it. Maybe that's true. I felt like that was cheesy, and they should have either let her die or do it in a better way where she, because I get tired of the whole they're dead, oh they're not thing in movies. It's like it happens a lot, and if you're gonna do it like in a more interesting way than just have her look like she's dead, and then the moves the hand. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen it 1,000 times, and it wasn't done particularly well in this. And then him dying right after, it just felt corny. Some of the stuff with C-3PO felt corny. Even the stuff with Billy D. Williams, some of that felt kind of corny. But it's, Star Wars. I'm sorry, but people said that the original trilogy was great, and it was. I loved it, and it's better than this trilogy. And but like, if you think there's not corny shit in those movies, everyone admits that Return of the Jedi with the Ewoks had corny stuff, but like, there's corny stuff in the other ones too. Like, come on, people. We're talking about a space opera with people with laser swords and telekinesis. Like, there's corny stuff. Okay, it's just that you got Harrison Ford and his prime. You got some of the stuff. Some of the people there, I feel like, set it up better. Set it up for greatness better, and it is overall, it is a better trilogy for sure. But like, it has its own corny stuff. But this one definitely it felt overly cheesy at times, and heavily fan service. But I think that that's okay. I mean, it was entertaining to me. I'll see it again. It was entertaining 2 times, and I'll see it again. Visually amazing, really good, some really good action. Music was top notch. My friend said there wasn't anything like revolutionary in terms of like Duel of the Fates, for example. But I mean, in the whole series, I mean, I guess the originals again they introduced all these themes, so those are like the greatest. But like the prequels, for example, I mean, I don't nothing stands out besides Duel of the Fates. Duel of the Fates was awesome, awesome music, some of the best in the whole series. This one, it had good music, and not like, and there's no new uh, specific pieces that were so great, but in general, it was good. Um, and I like the way they wove in the Star Wars theme with other themes. So, music, John Williams knows what he's doing. So that's basically, that's my more in depth review. I still think I still think it's good. It's not on the level of the original trilogy, but it's one of the better Star Wars movies, of the main series for sure. And it finally delivered on some stuff that I was waiting for. I wish the training scene had been longer, but at least the training scene was pretty cool at times. It had some really cool lightsaber fights, and it had some really cool concepts and wrapped up some of these long storylines really well. And I felt like redeemed Luke a little bit, and just Ray was. I mean, people say Luke wasn't such a greatly developed character. Ray was cool, man. I love the Jedi's. I love the whole that world, man. Like, it was cool seeing a new Jedi emerge and be super powerful and be like tempted when you have use a little bit of the dark side and then come back. And so I still rate it like I'm going like 8. I mean, objectively, maybe a 7.5 because of how much of a mess the story is, you know. Subjectively, I still think it's like an 8.5 for me. Um, it's a movie that I really enjoyed that I could see again and again. So, you know, that's where it's at for me. I'd love any comments of anybody that watches this, if they agree or disagree, and peace out. Lou Know It. I'll be back with more reviews soon.